If this is your first cruise, there are things you think you understand, and things you really don't. Cruise ships are bigger than people expect. Life on board works differently, and some of the little details can catch first-time cruisers completely off guard. Not in a bad way, just in a, wow, I wish I knew that earlier way. In this video, I'm breaking down 10 things first-time cruisers don't expect, but absolutely should. These aren't myths, horror stories, or random opinions. They're real cruise experiences that surprise almost everyone the first time they sail. And stay until the end, because I've added a bonus section with practical tips that can genuinely make your first cruise smoother, easier, and more enjoyable. If you love cruise tips, press like, comment cruise for you, and let's jump in. Number 1. Cruise ships feel much bigger than people expect. Almost every first-time cruiser underestimates this, and not by a little. Before you board, you see photos, videos, maybe even drone shots, and you think you understand how big the ship will be. But none of that really prepares you for what it feels like once you're actually on board. Modern cruise ships aren't just big, they're floating cities. You're not stepping onto a boat, you're stepping into a place with neighborhoods, multiple dining areas, theaters, pools, hidden walkways, quiet corners, and entire sections most people don't even discover on their first trip. It's very common for first-time cruisers to spend the first day slightly disoriented. You take an elevator and end up somewhere unexpected. You walk what feels like a short distance and realize you've crossed half the ship. You hear people talking about places you haven't even seen yet. And that's the moment most people think, oh, this is way bigger than I imagined. What surprises people even more is that you won't see everything, and that's normal. These ships are designed so that one cruise doesn't cover it all. Some areas are busy and obvious, while others are tucked away and easy to miss if you don't go looking. Once first-time cruisers realize they don't need to see everything, the experience gets better fast. You stop rushing, stop trying to do it all, and start enjoying the ship for what it really is, a massive floating world you get to explore at your own pace. And for most people, that realization is the first big wow moment of cruising. Number 2, you can get charged unexpectedly for towels. This one catches a lot of first-time cruisers completely off guard. On most cruise ships, pool and beach towels are included, so people assume they're casual. Grab one, use it, and toss it back somewhere later. It feels like a hotel situation. But on a cruise ship, towels are actually tracked. When you take a towel from the pool area or for a shore excursion, it's usually linked to your cabin. If it doesn't get scanned back in properly, or if it never makes its way back at all, it can quietly show up on your final bill. For first-time cruisers, this feels strange. You're not trying to steal a towel, you just didn't realize it mattered. The reason this rule exists is practical. Cruise ships carry thousands of towels, but they can't replace them easily while at sea. Keeping track prevents shortages later in the trip. Once you know this, it's easy to manage. You just make sure towels are returned to the correct place, or checked back in before the cruise ends. But for people who don't expect it, that unexpected charge can be a surprise. And it's one of those small details that first-time cruisers always talk about afterward. Number 3. People hide little rubber ducks all over the ship, and it's a big game. Most first-time cruisers have absolutely no idea this is even a thing. Then suddenly, on day 1 or 2, you spot a tiny rubber duck sitting on a staircase, tucked behind a plant, or perched on a ledge somewhere on the ship. And your first thought is usually, why is there a duck here? What you've stumbled into is an unofficial cruise tradition. Passengers bring small rubber ducks from home and hide them all over the ship for others to find. It turns into a massive, ship-wide scavenger hunt that runs quietly in the background of the cruise. Some ducks have tags with the ship name or sailing date. Some are meant to be kept. Others are meant to be re-hidden so the game keeps going. Kids love it, adults get weirdly competitive about it, and first-time cruisers are always shocked by how widespread it is. It's not organized by the cruise line. There's no announcement. No rules posted anywhere. It just exists. And once you know about it, you start noticing ducks everywhere. For first-time cruisers, this is one of those moments where you realize cruising has its own culture, little traditions that only make sense once you're on board. And it's usually the moment people think, okay, this place really is its own world. Number 4. The water in cruise ship pools often comes from the ocean. Most first-time cruisers assume the pools on board are filled the same way hotel pools are, with fresh water brought in from shore before the trip. In reality, cruise ships make their own water. The water in many cruise ship pools starts as seawater. It's taken directly from the ocean, then desalinated, filtered, and treated on board until it's safe and clean to use. Once people hear this, there's usually a pause. Because it sounds strange, almost futuristic, but it actually makes perfect sense. Cruise ships can't carry enough fresh water for thousands of passengers for days or weeks at a time. Instead, they operate like self-contained cities, producing their own water around the clock. By the time it reaches the pools, showers, and sinks, it's gone through multiple purification steps. You don't taste salt. You don't smell the ocean. It just feels like normal pool water. But knowing where it came from changes how people think about the ship. For first-time cruisers, this is one of those quiet wow moments. Not because it's scary, but because it shows just how advanced and self-sufficient cruise ships really are. Number 5. First-time cruisers pack way too much and wind up wearing half of it. Almost every first-time cruiser makes the same mistake. They pack outfits for every possible scenario. Dinner clothes, day clothes, backup clothes, just-in-case clothes, shoes for every mood, jackets they never touch. And then the cruise starts. What people don't expect is how quickly comfort takes over. You find a few outfits you love, a couple of pairs of shoes that actually work, and those become your go-to choices for the entire trip. The rest of the suitcase barely gets opened. Cruise days are long and active. You're walking a lot, moving between decks, going in and out of air-conditioned spaces, and switching from pool to food to shows without much downtime in between. First-time cruisers imagine they'll change clothes multiple times a day. In reality, most people stick to what's easy and comfortable. By the end of the trip, there's almost always a moment where you're packing to go home and realize just how many things never got worn at all. It's one of those lessons people laugh about afterward, and then remember for every cruise after that. Number 6. Dress codes and theme nights still exist, even if you didn't know. A lot of first-time cruisers assume dress codes are a thing of the past. They picture cruising as completely casual. Wear what you want, whenever you want, everywhere on the ship. And in many areas, that's true, but not everywhere. Most cruise ships still have dress expectations, especially in main dining rooms, specialty restaurants, and on certain theme or elegant nights. And the tricky part is that these rules aren't always explained clearly up front, so first-time cruisers are often caught off guard. They show up in shorts or casual wear, only to realize the vibe is very different from what they expected. Sometimes they feel out of place. Occasionally, they're asked to change. It's not about being fancy for the sake of it. These nights are meant to create a certain atmosphere, slower meals, nicer settings, and a chance for people who enjoy dressing up to do so. Once you know this, it's easy to plan for. 1 or 2 nicer outfits is usually more than enough. But for people who don't expect it, dress codes and theme nights can be a surprise. And one of those details first-time cruisers always talk about after the trip. Number 7. You really can lose track of time on board. First-time cruisers often expect the days to feel structured: breakfast, excursion, dinner, sleep, repeat. That's not what actually happens. Once you're on board, normal time cues start to disappear. You wake up in one place and go to sleep somewhere else. Sea days blend together. Port days feel long and short at the same time. There's always something happening. Food available almost all day. Shows in the evening. Activities running back to back. And because you don't have to drive, cook, or plan the basics of your day, your usual sense of routine fades quickly. People are often surprised by how quickly days pass. Someone mentions it's already day 4, and you have to stop and think about it. Ship time adds to this. The clock on board doesn't always match local time, and first-time cruisers don't expect how disorienting that can feel at first. It's not a bad thing. In fact, for many people, it's one of the most relaxing parts of cruising. But it's definitely something first-time cruisers don't expect until they experience it themselves. Number 8. There's a real social world on board, with cruise-specific roles. First-time cruisers often assume everyone just keeps to themselves. You imagine strangers passing in hallways, sitting quietly at dinner, and then disappearing back to their cabins. But cruising doesn't really work like that. Very quickly, you start recognizing the same faces. You see the same people at breakfast, the same couples at trivia, the same group lining up for shows, and without trying, the ship starts to feel familiar. There are also cruise-specific roles that surprise first-timers. Dance hosts who partner with guests. Trivia regulars who take it very seriously. entertainment staff who become familiar faces by the end of the week, even crew members you start greeting by name. It's subtle, but it creates a sense of community that most people don't expect from a vacation with thousands of strangers. For first-time cruisers, this social rhythm can be surprising and often comforting. By the end of the cruise, it doesn't feel like you were surrounded by strangers at all. Number 9. A cruise can feel too big to explore in just one trip. A lot of first-time cruisers board with a quiet goal in mind, to see everything. They look at deck plans, circle restaurants, bookmark shows, and mentally plan to experience every part of the ship before the cruise ends. And then reality sets in. Modern cruise ships are packed with more than anyone can realistically do in one sailing. Water parks, theaters, lounges, hidden bars, quiet decks, activities running at the same time. It's all layered on top of each other. First-time cruisers are often surprised by how quickly days fill up. You choose one thing, and suddenly 3 others overlap. You miss something you meant to do, then realize it's already the last sea day. At first, this can feel frustrating, like you didn't get the full experience. But seasoned cruisers know the truth. Cruise ships are designed this way on purpose. They're built so there's always something new left for next time. Once first-time cruisers let go of the idea of doing everything, the pressure lifts. The cruise becomes more enjoyable, more relaxed, and far less rushed. And that realization usually changes how people cruise forever. Number 10. The ship feels like its own world once you're on board. This isn't one specific rule or surprise. It's a feeling most first-time cruisers don't expect at all. Once you're on board, the outside world fades faster than you think. Money works differently. Time works differently. Even your priorities shift. Your days are shaped by ship time, not local time. Your meals, entertainment, movement, and schedule all revolve around the ship's rhythm. You stop thinking in terms of errands, driving, or daily routines and start thinking in decks, venues, and shows. The ship becomes your city. Dining, entertainment, safety, social life, and even little traditions all exist within this floating bubble. And because everything you need is right there, it feels immersive in a way most land vacations never do. First-time cruisers usually don't expect how quickly this happens. One moment you're boarding with a suitcase and a plan, and a short time later, you're fully in cruise mode, wondering how the week went so fast. That's why cruising doesn't really compare to hotels, resorts, or tours. It operates on its own rules, its own pace, and its own version of reality. And once you experience that for the first time, you finally understand why people keep coming back. If you've made it this far, you can probably tell cruising is a little different from what most first-time passengers expect. If this video has been helpful so far, consider subscribing to Cruise for You. It really helps the channel, and it lets you catch more cruise tips before you sail. And before we wrap up, I've put together a bonus section with simple, practical tips that can genuinely make your first cruise smoother and more enjoyable. Let's get into those. Bonus tip 1. Don't try to do everything on day 1. The first day of a cruise feels exciting and overwhelming at the same time. You've just boarded, there's food everywhere, music playing, announcements happening, and it feels like you should be doing something every minute so you don't miss out. A lot of first-time cruisers fall into that trap. They rush from place to place, try to explore every deck, line up for things immediately, and end the first day feeling oddly exhausted, sometimes before the cruise has even really started. What most people don't realize is that the first day is always the busiest and most chaotic. Cabins may not be ready yet. Elevators are packed. Everyone is still learning the layout. You don't need to conquer the ship in the first few hours. Taking it slower on day 1 actually sets the tone for the entire cruise. Pick 1 or 2 simple priorities, get your bearings, and let the rest unfold naturally. Cruising works best when you ease into it, not when you sprint. Bonus tip 2. Explore the ship early, even if you're tired. After boarding, a lot of first-time cruisers just want to drop their bags, grab food, and sit down. That makes sense. It's been a long travel day. But one of the smartest things you can do early on is take a slow walk around the ship. You don't need to see everything. You're not memorizing deck plans. You're just getting a feel for where things are, where the elevators are, which staircases connect which decks, where the quieter areas seem to be. This small bit of exploration pays off all week. You'll waste less time getting lost, feel more confident moving around, and naturally find shortcuts other passengers never notice. First-time cruisers who skip this often feel disoriented for days. Those who do it early feel settled almost immediately. Bonus tip 3. Always double-check ship time before leaving port. This is one of the easiest mistakes first-time cruisers make, and one of the most stressful. Ship time doesn't always match local time in port. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and the difference can catch people out. You might look at your phone, see the local time, and think you have plenty of time left, when the ship is actually preparing to leave. That's why experienced cruisers always check ship time before heading ashore, and again, before heading back. It sounds simple, but it matters. Missing the ship because of a time mix-up is a situation no one wants to experience. Once you get into the habit of thinking in ship time, everything gets easier and far less stressful. Bonus tip 4. Check the daily schedule every morning. Every cruise day has its own rhythm, and most of it is planned out for you. You just have to know where to look. The daily schedule lists shows, activities, special events, dining times, and little things that are easy to miss if you don't check it. First-time cruisers often assume they'll hear about everything through announcements. They won't. Some of the best experiences on board are quiet, tucked into the schedule without much fanfare. A cooking demo, a small live performance, a trivia session that turns out to be surprisingly fun. Taking a minute each morning to glance at the schedule helps you spot the things you'd otherwise miss and avoid the regret of finding out about something after it's already happened. Bonus tip 5. Don't save everything for later. Cruises have a funny way of making time feel endless, until suddenly it isn't. First-time cruisers often think, "I'll do that tomorrow," or "I'll catch that later in the week." And before they realize it, the cruise is halfway over. If something catches your interest, a show, an activity, a spot on the ship, it's usually worth doing it when you see it. There's no guarantee it will line up with your schedule again, and the days go faster than you expect. The cruisers who enjoy their trip the most are the ones who say yes in the moment instead of waiting for the perfect time that never quite comes. Bonus tip 6. Talk to your cabin steward on day 1. A lot of first-time cruisers barely interact with their cabin steward beyond a quick hello. What many don't realize is how helpful that relationship can be. Cabin stewards deal with hundreds of small requests every cruise. Extra towels, ice for your room, storage ideas, help with the layout, even little fixes that make the cabin more comfortable. If you introduce yourself early and mention anything you might need, those small things tend to get sorted quickly, often without you needing to ask again. It's not about special treatment, it's about communication. For first-time cruisers, this simple conversation can quietly improve the entire trip without adding any effort at all. Bonus tip 7. Expect crowds, then plan slightly around them. First-time cruisers often expect the ship to feel busy, but they don't always expect when it will feel busiest. There are peak times for almost everything. The buffet right after boarding, elevators just before dinner, pools on sea days, shows right before they start. The surprise isn't that crowds exist, it's how much difference timing makes. Eating a little earlier or later, arriving a few minutes before or after peak times, or using stairs for a few decks can completely change how an area feels. Once first-time cruisers start adjusting their timing even slightly, the ship feels calmer and easier to enjoy. It's not about avoiding people, it's about flowing around them. Bonus tip 8. Remember that relaxing is doing it right. First-time cruisers often feel a quiet pressure to make the most of every moment. There's so much happening on board that it can feel like slowing down means missing out. Sitting still can feel unproductive, even on vacation. But cruising isn't about ticking boxes. Some of the best cruise moments aren't scheduled at all. Sitting on a quiet deck, watching the ocean go by, having an unplanned conversation, doing nothing, and enjoying it. The people who leave cruises feeling the happiest aren't the ones who did the most. They're the ones who let the cruise set the pace instead of fighting it. Once you give yourself permission to relax, the whole experience feels better. And that's something every first-time cruiser deserves to know.